Nobody in that courtroom had any inkling of what was about to transpire. Not the reporters, hunched over their notebooks with pens poised, ready to capture every phrase, every subtle reaction, every flicker of emotion. Not the lawyers, whose meticulous strategies, rehearsed arguments, and careful calibrations had been designed to anticipate every twist of the trial. And certainly not T himself, the figure at the center of this unfolding drama, a man whose entire career had been built on an aura of calculated control, carefully cultivated influence, and an image that suggested he could navigate any storm without flinching. The moment the judge began to speak, the energy in the room shifted, though initially it was almost imperceptible. Observers later described it as a subtle tremor running beneath the surface, a quiet prelude to what would explode into a full-blown upheaval of everything that had been expected. It wasn't a typical verdict. It wasn't a sentence that could be measured or rationalized by the usual standards of legal outcomes. It was, by all accounts, something so sudden, so jarring, that even the most seasoned courtroom veterans and reporters, who had followed the case day after day, week after week, found themselves caught off guard, their mental preparedness instantly rendered meaningless. T, at the center of this unfolding storm, was a man who had spent years perfecting an image of control, dominance, and strategic mastery. He had projected confidence, intellect, and an unshakable ability to anticipate outcomes. Every public appearance, every statement, every carefully orchestrated move was part of a grand strategy to reinforce a narrative. T was untouchable, a master of influence who understood the rules of the system better than anyone else. Yet in that instant, all of that carefully constructed authority seemed to evaporate. The moment the sentence landed, T was exposed, vulnerable, and suddenly faced with a reality that was entirely beyond his control. Insiders present in the courtroom later recounted the shift in energy. It was immediate, almost tangible. A suffocating silence fell, heavy and oppressive. Eyes darted around the room, glances were exchanged. No one knew whether to speak, to react, or simply to freeze in place. The atmosphere, once formal and structured, had dissolved into something charged, something unpredictable. According to multiple sources, T's reaction in that first moment defied expectation. Rather than retreating into despair or attempting to shield himself behind composed stoicism, he unleashed a raw, explosive energy, one that reverberated through the courtroom in a way that reportedly left witnesses unsure if intervention was necessary. The insiders' accounts are vivid. "It didn't feel like a courtroom anymore," one source later said. "The walls, the protocols, the rituals of the legal process all seemed to disappear, replaced by an intensity that hovered on the brink of chaos. It was the kind of moment that forces observers to confront a person as they truly are, stripped of the veneer of public persona, stripped of the carefully constructed armor of image and reputation." For T, this was that moment. This was not a minor setback. It was a seismic shift, the kind of verdict that has the potential to affect every dimension of life: career, finances, public perception, and family. Under such intense pressure, humans react in one of two ways: they either break or they snap. Reports suggest that for T, it was the latter. The outburst, the intensity of the response, and the dramatic energy he displayed in the courtroom may have been more shocking than the sentence itself. Accounts of the aftermath describe heated exchanges, moments of confrontation, and the presence of security stepping in to manage the situation. A rare glimpse at someone whose public image is one of meticulous control, experiencing the collapse of that narrative in real time. What exactly did the judge say that provoked this? Multiple insiders described the sentence as insane, a word that barely captures the shockwaves that rippled through the courtroom. People who had been following every nuance of the trial, from the earliest whispers of investigation to the detailed examination of evidence, were left momentarily stunned. And in those first minutes, as stunned gasps, whispered comments, and shocked expressions spread across the room, journalists scrambled to capture the unfolding drama, the gravity of which was immediately apparent. Understanding the magnitude of that moment requires stepping back, not just to the beginning of the trial, but to the image T had painstakingly constructed over the years. He was not just another celebrity navigating fame, fortune, or public controversy. He had cultivated a persona that suggested strategy, intellect, and foresight. Every move, every word, every carefully staged appearance was part of a broader orchestration designed to communicate control. T had crafted the impression of inevitability, a man who could anticipate every turn, manage every risk, and emerge unscathed from every storm. His reputation extended far beyond music or wealth. It encompassed leadership, influence, and authority. People were convinced that T was always a step ahead, that he could navigate the complexities of life, business, and public scrutiny with precision. And for years, that image held firm. But in that courtroom, in a matter of seconds, that carefully maintained facade fractured. The moment laid bare the reality that no matter how much control one believes they possess, there is always a point at which events surpass one's grasp. The unraveling did not appear out of nowhere. Insiders report that the situation had been quietly developing for months. Subtle leaks, muted reports, and minor mentions of investigation or missteps circulated under the radar. While the public barely noticed, those closest to T were observing, preparing, and quietly anticipating potential fallout. Yet T, it seems, remained deliberate, measured, and silent, either convinced the storm would pass or strategically analyzing the situation without revealing the extent of his awareness. When the public eventually caught wind of the details, the impact was immediate and overwhelming. The story exploded across platforms, dominating news cycles, social media feeds, and online commentary. Reaction channels dissected every nuance, blogs analyzed every possible angle, and audiences who had not followed the case before suddenly found themselves drawn into the drama. Through all of it, T maintained a public appearance of composure, never allowing visible panic to betray the inner chaos, holding onto the semblance of control even as events spiraled. But the courtroom stripped away that control. Every layer of calculated persona, every measure of outward confidence, dissolved the moment the sentence landed. Observers witnessed a man accustomed to power confronted with circumstances entirely beyond his influence. And the anticipation, the tension leading up to this moment, was as crucial to understanding the scene as the verdict itself. The trial itself had not been sudden. Reports suggest that tension had been simmering for months, building quietly until it reached a critical mass. Subtle leaks, whispers of investigation, and hints of missteps created an atmosphere of mounting pressure. Some accounts suggest T may have underestimated the scale, believing that his experience and influence could shield him from disaster. Others imply that he knew but trusted in his strategic skill to navigate the legal landscape. Regardless, the buildup magnified the impact of the courtroom moment. As the trial commenced, attention sharpened to a razor's edge. Every statement, every testimony, every legal argument carried significance far beyond the ordinary. Lawyers moved with precision. Observers remained on edge. And through it all, T balanced the weight of his reputation, legacy, and public perception against the unpredictable dynamics of the legal system. Then, the verdict arrived. And in that instant, the entire courtroom dynamic shifted. Those inside described a silence so thick it could almost be touched, followed by a reaction that no one had anticipated. T did not withdraw, nor did he descend into despair. Instead, his energy erupted, raw and intense. Witnesses reported heated exchanges, and the moment reportedly escalated to a point where security intervened. The courtroom, once a site of structured deliberation and protocol, became a stage for a human display of emotion and unfiltered intensity, a scene that would dominate conversations for days, both in legal circles and across social media. The psychological dimension of T's reaction cannot be understated. This was more than a response to a sentence. It was the collapse of an identity meticulously crafted over decades. The composure, strategic thinking, and control that had defined him were disrupted in one irreversible moment. Observers later remarked that this collision of image and reality created a tension that was both electric and unpredictable. Even after the initial outburst subsided, a quieter, more calculating energy remained. Insiders suggest that the outward eruption was only the surface manifestation of a deeper strategic reassessment. T, in that moment, may have already been plotting his next steps, evaluating how to reclaim influence or navigate the fallout. The public response was swift. Social media erupted, dissecting the verdict and T's reaction in minute detail. Commentary, speculation, and analysis flooded every platform. People debated endlessly. Did he react appropriately? Was this a crack in the facade of invincibility? Could he recover, or had this moment marked the beginning of an irreversible decline? But the larger truth extends beyond the courtroom. This was not merely about legal judgment. It was about the fragility of public perception, the collision of cultivated persona with unrelenting reality, and the exposure of human vulnerability beneath layers of calculated image. It was a spectacle of influence meeting limitation, strategy meeting unpredictability, a moment that captured the public imagination because it illuminated the human cost of constructing power and identity. Even after the verdict, T's presence and strategy continued to command attention. He did not succumb to visible panic. The initial explosive response had passed, but the silent, calculating mental work, the assessment of next moves, the evaluation of how to regain control was just beginning. And that is often the most telling part of such a moment. The quiet, invisible strategy that follows the outward display of emotion. The fallout unfolded almost immediately. Social platforms buzzed with commentary, speculation, and endless debate. Analysts dissected the legal reasoning, the courtroom conduct, and the implications for T's career and public persona. The questions were endless. Could T navigate the aftermath effectively? Was this a turning point or merely a temporary setback? How would the world perceive him now, in a reality stripped of the controlled narrative he had long maintained? In essence, this moment was not just a verdict. It was a revelation. It exposed the limits of control, the vulnerability behind influence, and the fragility of reputation built over decades. It illustrated how a single instant could unravel the carefully woven threads of identity, strategy, and public perception. And it highlighted a truth that even the most strategic, powerful individuals cannot always dictate the outcome when faced with forces beyond their control. As T and those closest to him navigate the aftermath, the story continues to evolve. Legal ramifications, media narratives, and public scrutiny are intertwined, each shaping the unfolding consequences. Every statement or deliberate silence becomes a signal, a strategic move, or a reflection of assessment. Observers watch, analyze, and speculate, but the true calculation remains known only to T himself. The courtroom moment serves as a stark reminder of the collision between image and reality. The meticulous persona, cultivated over decades of career, influence, and strategic maneuvering, collided with a verdict that stripped away every illusion of invincibility. The spectacle of power confronting limitation captivated not only those present in the courtroom, but also the global audience following every twist of the story. Now, as T evaluates his options and plans his response, the implications of that instant continue to resonate. Every step taken, every word spoken or withheld, is interpreted, analyzed, and speculated upon by the public. The story is far from over. The trial, the media coverage, and the cultural conversation surrounding this moment are all ongoing. Ultimately, this was not simply about the sentence delivered in a courtroom. It was a study in control, influence, and the precarious nature of reputation. It was about how a single, unpredictable moment can dismantle a persona meticulously built over decades. It revealed that no matter how much authority or power a person appears to wield, There exists a moment when reality overrides perception, a moment when preparation and strategy can meet the unforeseen with explosive results. And so, the question that lingers is unavoidable. How will T respond? Will he adapt and reclaim control? Will he navigate the new reality and rebuild? Or will this moment mark a turning point that reshapes his trajectory irrevocably? Because one thing is certain, nobody in that courtroom, or on the far-reaching platforms of social media, was prepared for what happened next. The shock, the intensity, and the spectacle of human emotion laid bare captured attention in a way that transcended the immediate legal context. And as the world continues to watch, the story, far from concluding, unfolds into new chapters, each as compelling and unpredictable as the moment when the verdict first echoed through the courtroom. The reporters, the lawyers, and even T himself had faced trials, negotiations, and strategic battles before. Yet, nothing had prepared anyone for this. The instantaneous shattering of control, the eruption of raw emotion, and the undeniable proof that even those who seem untouchable are, in the end, human. The courtroom, for that brief yet monumental stretch of time, became a theater of raw truth, exposing vulnerability, resilience, and the complex interplay between identity, perception, and reality. As the dust settled, as the immediate shock waves faded, T maintained an aura of strategic calculation. The initial explosive response may have captured the headlines, but insiders note that beneath the surface, the gears of assessment and planning were already turning. In moments like these, the silent recalibration, the strategic mental work, is often far more critical than what is visible to the public eye. It is in this quiet aftermath that power is reclaimed, narratives are reshaped, and the next moves are determined. Minutes after leaving the courtroom, the fallout accelerated. Despite restricted access to cameras, segments of the event leaked immediately. Phones had recorded gestures, words, and escalating tension. Eyewitnesses flooded social media with conflicting accounts. Each version heightened the sense of chaos and intensity. Some reported T being physically guided out while still arguing. Others claimed his final words were directed at someone unexpected, sparking speculation about intent and alliances. Social media responded almost instantaneously. TikTok edits, YouTube breakdowns, Twitter threads, and fan speculation turned a single courtroom reaction into a viral event. Insider details, verified or not, circulated at lightning speed. One phrase emerged as a rallying point: insane sentence. It captured disbelief, outrage, and confusion. It also intensified the pressure on T's team. According to multiple sources, his camp moved swiftly. Statements were drafted, lawyers consulted, internal strategy meetings took place. While the public was still processing the viral clips, plans were already being executed behind closed doors. Every action indicated that this was not a moment of defeat, it was a deliberate pause before the next phase. Later reports suggested that the sentence may not be final. Claims of ongoing appeals, strategic legal maneuvers, and preparations to challenge the outcome circulated. If even partially true, the courtroom spectacle was only the beginning, a precursor to a legal and public battle capable of reshaping the narrative entirely. The public response evolved quickly. Comments reflected disbelief and defiance. Anticipation replaced shock. Social media users, fans, and independent observers watched intently, analyzing every post, statement, and leak for clues about T's next move. People were no longer passive spectators. They were participants in an unfolding drama, invested in every detail of what would come next. The moment in that courtroom was not simply a verdict. It was a seismic collision of expectation and reality, image and truth, control and chaos. And as the story continues to unfold, it has become clear. The drama is far from over. T's next moves, both public and private, will define not only his legacy and reputation, but also the perception of power, strategy, and resilience in the public eye. Absolutely. I can rewrite and expand your script into a detailed 3,000-word version. To make it fully immersive and compelling, I'll break it into sections with narrative depth, social media reactions, legal speculation, psychological analysis, and the broader implications. This version will maintain the original suspense while adding context, storytelling, and analytical layers. Here, the rewritten 3,000-word version. It was a day that no one in the room, or beyond it, would ever forget. A day that began like any other in the hallowed halls of justice, but quickly escalated into something far more extraordinary. The air in the courtroom had always been thick with tension during high-profile cases, but what unfolded that day was beyond the ordinary. It wasn't a minor shock, a small ripple, or even a wave. It was a tsunami of consequences, a seismic shift that seemed to knock the very floor out from under everyone present. And at the center of this storm stood T, the figure whose public persona had long been synonymous with strategy, foresight, and untouchable control. T had spent decades cultivating an image of precision, authority, and calculated composure. Every public appearance, every carefully crafted interview, every subtle gesture had been part of a larger strategy, a projection that he understood the game better than anyone else. The world, from fans to media analysts to industry peers, had bought into it. T was untouchable, unshakable, and always 2 steps ahead, or so it seemed. But on that day, all of that carefully constructed perception came crashing down in a single, explosive courtroom moment. According to multiple insiders, the moment the judge read the sentence, the energy in the room shifted immediately, almost violently. Silence fell first, dense and suffocating, a kind that presses against your chest and rattles your ears. Everyone looked at everyone else, trying to process what had just occurred. Confusion, disbelief, and horror mingled in the same instant. And then came T's reaction, a reaction that insiders describe as explosive, raw, unfiltered, and unforgettable. Observers reported that it wasn't a contained frustration or a subtle display of disbelief. It was something entirely different, something that forced the room to pause, that turned a legal proceeding into a theater of unpredictability. Chairs shifted, voices rose, security took notice, and for a few moments, the courtroom seemed to lose its yuzu. Structure. The judge, the jury, even the polished wood and heavy decor, all faded into the background. All that remained was the electric tension radiating from T, and the collective realization that this was no ordinary reaction. Witnesses and insiders began describing what followed in a way that reads like a script from a high-stakes drama. There were verbal exchanges, gestures, sharp words, and moments of confrontation that made even seasoned courtroom veterans uneasy. One insider said it didn't feel like a courtroom anymore. It felt like the air itself had been charged with chaos, unpredictability, and imminent escalation. And through it all, T stood as the central figure, simultaneously at the mercy of circumstance and in control of a narrative that the public hadn't yet fully grasped. The pivotal question, of course, remained. What had the judge actually said to provoke such a response? According to multiple accounts, the sentence was insane, a word that carries enormous weight in legal circles. For those who had been following the case closely, parsing every motion, and analyzing every document, the verdict was beyond comprehension. And as T's reaction rippled through the room, those present began to realize that what they were witnessing wasn't just about legal outcome. It was a moment that challenged perception itself. The man who had built his life around mastery of control, strategy, and image had been confronted with something entirely outside his influence. Years of cultivating a persona of invulnerability and foresight seemed to evaporate in that instant. For decades, T had carefully controlled the optics of his public and private life. He had mastered the art of perception, giving the impression that he was always 3 steps ahead, always aware of every possible contingency. But in that courtroom, it became abundantly clear that no one, no matter how calculated, is immune to the shock of reality when it lands fully formed and unexpected. Interestingly, insiders indicate that the case had been quietly escalating long before the public took notice. Minor investigations, subtle whispers, and behind-the-scenes maneuvering had laid the groundwork for what would become the explosive courtroom moment. Yet publicly, T had chosen silence. Deliberate, measured silence. Some interpreted it as overconfidence, an assumption that the storm would pass. Others believed he had a deeper understanding of the situation than he revealed. Either way, the silence only intensified the tension. Once the verdict became public, the reaction didn't trickle out slowly. It erupted, catching fans, media, and casual observers completely off guard. Social media erupted almost immediately. Clips of T's reaction were captured on phones, edited into short viral snippets, and shared across platforms. Within hours, hashtags like TI sentence, explosive reaction, and Justice or setup were trending. Observers who had previously been indifferent suddenly became deeply invested. Analysis, speculation, and debate dominated comment sections, discussion threads, and live streams. People weren't just reacting to what they saw, they were trying to parse motive, strategy, and implication. The courtroom explosion became a lens through which everyone viewed the larger system, questioning not just the verdict but the fairness, process, and power structures behind it. And yet through all of this, T himself remained largely silent. No social media posts, no public statements, no direct response. Silence in this context was loud. Every pause, every absence of commentary became fuel for speculation. Was he strategizing behind the scenes, delegating public communication to his legal team, sending subtle signals to observers who understood the unspoken cues? Fans and commentators dissected every hour of inactivity, projecting intent, plotting potential moves, and anticipating future action. The silence itself became a critical element of the unfolding narrative. Then came the twist that caught even the most attentive observers off guard. Late-night leaks suggested that there may have been something said or introduced during the hearing that never appeared in official records. According to these whispers, a piece of new information, last minute and unexpected, had been presented right before the sentence was finalized. If true, this revelation would provide context for T's extreme reaction. It suggested that the explosive display wasn't simply emotion or frustration. It might have been a strategic response to something that the public had not seen and might never see. The possibility of unseen courtroom developments transformed the narrative from a viral spectacle into a multifaceted story of legal intrigue, psychological tension, and systemic uncertainty. Questions multiplied. What was this information? Why wasn't it reported? Who knew about it before it reached T? Each unanswered question created another layer of speculation, another narrative thread for the public to follow. Meanwhile, the media frenzy intensified. Traditional outlets tried to verify claims, journalists dissected social media clips, and independent commentators posted theories and breakdowns. YouTube channels uploaded hour-long analyses, complete with slow-motion replays of gestures and expressions, highlighting the tension and the reactions in painstaking detail. Every movement, every nuance, every fleeting facial expression was scrutinized. The moment had transcended simple courtroom drama. It was now a high-stakes psychological study broadcast live across the digital world. The online conversation was as fractured as it was intense. Users split into factions almost immediately. Some defended T, arguing that the sentence was disproportionate, targeted, or influenced by forces beyond the courtroom. Others insisted that fame could not shield anyone from accountability, and that legal consequences should be faced regardless of celebrity status. Each post, reply, and thread added to the narrative, expanding it far beyond the confines of the courtroom. What began as a singular event had become a sprawling discourse on justice, celebrity, power, and public perception. Adding another layer of complexity, prominent voices from the industry and media began weighing in indirectly. Comments were cryptic, insinuating that the public was missing essential context. One viral post read, This isn't finished. This is just the beginning of a longer fight. The word beginning reframed everything. What was initially perceived as a reaction to past events now became anticipation for future developments. The public shifted from reacting to observing, from judging to waiting, from curiosity to strategic anticipation. Suddenly, the focus wasn't merely on what had happened, it was on what might happen next. The tension reached new heights when speculation about legal maneuvers emerged. Unverified reports suggested that T's team was actively preparing appeals, strategizing responses, and planning maneuvers that could introduce new evidence or information into the public sphere. The implication was clear. The next chapter might not be a continuation of the same story, but a complete transformation. New revelations, fresh strategies, and unexpected developments could shift the public perception entirely, changing the narrative from one of reaction to one of anticipation and strategic counteraction. By now, the situation had entered what could only be described as a second phase. The first phase had been raw emotion, captured in real time and shared online, a viral spectacle of unfiltered reaction. The second phase was analysis, speculation, and narrative building, a deeper, quieter, and more strategic layer that teased the complexities hidden behind the viral clips. Together, these two tracks created a dynamic, almost electric environment where the story could evolve unpredictably at any moment. T's silence remained central to the tension. Far from being empty, it carried strategic weight. Every hour without public commentary, every delay in official statements, amplified speculation. Observers projected strategy, plotting, or controlled response onto the absence. Anticipation became a narrative tool in itself, fueling discussion and engagement. The digital sphere was alive, dynamic, and saturated with curiosity. Every rumor, every snippet, every unverified post became another thread in an unfolding tapestry of intrigue. Late into the evening, speculation hit its apex. Hashtags dominated, videos circulated ceaselessly, and commentary threads dissected the incident from every possible angle. It was no longer about the sentence or T alone. It was about perception, control, narrative power, and the unseen dynamics at play. Social media acted as both amplifier and arena, with each new post escalating anticipation and deepening the sense of suspense. The public, for the first time, wasn't just observing events. They were invested, waiting for the next move, calculating possible outcomes, and debating potential strategies. And then, as if to punctuate the tension, a single cryptic message appeared online briefly, then vanished. It read, "Y'all saw the reaction, but y'all don't know the reason. When the truth comes out, everything is going to look different." No attribution, no verification, nothing concrete, yet the impact was immediate. That single post acted as a spark in dry tinder, igniting a flurry of speculation and anticipation. The story had become a living narrative, one that could expand in multiple directions depending on what, when, or if new information surfaced. The courtroom spectacle had transformed into a broader saga, where each development, real or rumored, carried weight and consequence. Observers now had to consider multiple layers of the unfolding story. There was the visible, the courtroom outburst, the viral clips, the trending hashtags. And then there was the invisible, the unverified insider whispers, potential legal maneuvers, sealed files, strategic silence, and hidden motivations. Together, these layers created a multidimensional narrative, one that required constant attention and analysis. The public wasn't just reacting. They were predicting, dissecting, and engaging in a collective effort to understand the larger story. From a psychological perspective, T's behavior reflected a complex interplay of emotion, strategy, and perception. The explosive courtroom moment was not merely cathartic, it was communicative, signaling both frustration and intent. His calculated silence afterward added another layer, transforming speculation into anticipation, shaping the narrative as much as any public statement might have. Every observer, consciously or unconsciously, was now a participant in a real-time narrative experiment, with the unfolding story serving as both subject and stage. As the hours and days progressed, the story continued to evolve. Insider claims, unverified posts, and viral analysis kept the public engaged, ensuring that attention remained fixed on the saga. Each development, whether real or speculative, reinforced the idea that the situation was far from over. The narrative had expanded beyond courtroom walls, beyond social media feeds, and beyond initial interpretations. It had become an ecosystem of information, speculation, and anticipation, where the visible and invisible intertwined to create a constantly shifting story. Ultimately, the unfolding events highlighted a fundamental truth: control, perception, and influence are never absolute. No matter how calculated, no matter how prepared, a single moment can redefine reality. T's courtroom reaction was both an end and a beginning, a climax and a prologue, a spectacle and a signal. And while the public had witnessed only fragments, the broader narrative, strategic, psychological, and systemic, was far more complex, dynamic, and unfinished. As the digital storm raged on, one thing became clear: this story was not a moment frozen in time. It was a living, evolving saga with every participant, whether insider, observer, or casual fan, playing a role in shaping its trajectory. The courtroom explosion, viral reactions, cryptic posts, and strategic silence were only the opening acts. The next chapters promised new revelations, escalating tension, and the possibility of transformations that could redefine the public's understanding of control, influence, and justice. So now the questions remain, sharper and more urgent than ever. What truly happened inside that courtroom? What caused T to react with such intensity? Was there unseen information, hidden context, or strategic maneuvering at play? And when will the truth, or the next development, emerge to either confirm or shatter speculation? These questions hover over the narrative like charged particles, waiting to coalesce into clarity, or perhaps ignite yet another wave of unpredictability. For anyone following the story, one conclusion is unavoidable: this is far from over. The courtroom drama, the social media storm, the strategic silence, the cryptic messages, and the unverified insider leaks all point to a saga that is ongoing, layered, and complex. The anticipation is part of the story itself. The speculation feeds the narrative, and T's next move, public or private, may very well redefine everything that has come before. And so we wait, we watch, we analyze. Because if this saga has taught us anything, it's that the story is alive, unpredictable, and far from finished. What we witnessed in that courtroom was only the beginning, the spark that ignited a broader narrative, one filled with tension, strategy, and the ever-present question: what will happen next?